Hello, I would like to give you a brief presentation on the benefits of modeling your enterprise. First, I'll give you a few reasons why the modeling makes sense. We then go into the stakeholders and their requirements and focus for the rest of the presentation on the process modeling, multi-layer, POLDAT objects and also on the notation and frameworks. At the end, we take a brief look to the different modeling tools on the marketplace. My name is Helmut. I'm business and IT consultant since more than 10 years. I hope you will enjoy the following presentation. So why do we need to model the enterprise? First of all, it's about building and preserving the knowledge management. It's also about reusing information in different projects and not start from scratch every time and therefore wasting time and money. Then stored information can also be used for decision making. And it's also about giving the stakeholders an environment to store the information objects in a secure, scalable and easy to use environment. Okay, let's take a closer look to the stakeholders and their requirements. There are, for example, the compliance teams responsible for implementing MiFID, SOX, Basel or any kind of ISO standards. We have the enterprise architects responsible for documenting and analyzing the IT infrastructure of an enterprise. We also have the operational teams responsible for the effectiveness of the running operation. And a whole range of other teams, all performing their own projects to help the enterprise to improve their processes. So let's take a closer look first to the compliance teams. They're normally interested in the process flows to get an understanding who is responsible for doing what. They're also interested in the compliance requirements, in the controls and how all these objects relate to the process flow. They're also interested to get an understanding of a compliance status. Are they compliant, not compliant? Do they have any opportunity to improve? And all this together maybe with a schedule to get an understanding which are the different assessments they need to perform and who is responsible for doing these assessments. So these are normally a few of the requirements for a compliance team. The enterprise architect focusing more on high-level processes but more on the IT component. A D component like a network diagram, architecture diagram to get some dashboard views like this example here. They might be also interested in entity modeling, physical entity, logical entity modeling could be on their requirement list. But they're definitely interested in any kind of reporting, helps them to understand the impact analysis. So if they remove a core IT component, how does this affect the rest of the IT organization? Then we have the operational teams, and they're normally using flows that helps you to execute, like this BPMN diagram, which you can transform as a people code and to execute in a workflow engine. Other organizations using embedded BPMN suites, so they can draw and execute in the same tool of choice. Also, depending on their requirements, they can either focus on system-centric workflows or human-centric workflows. So the system are focusing on integrating with other systems. The human is pretty much the human intervention focus. But definitely important for them is the business activity monitoring. So they want exactly to know how many processes are performed, what is the status of each process. They might have also some SLA embedded to get an understanding if there are any breaches or any possible improvements. The other teams, for example like the Six Sigma team, is focusing on calculating the measurement for Six Sigma to help the organization to improve. Similar to failure mode effect analysis. So they're all different projects, all different initiatives helping the enterprise to improve. Like this value stream mapping, helping to streamline the process. Or any kind of assessment, in this case it's CMMI, helping to assess your maturity. So at the end, every compliance team or every project has its own requirements, its own specific needs to document. Unfortunately, they have also different solutions in place. So different compliance teams using different tools. The operational teams other teams, enterprise architects using Visio and so on. There are plenty of other tools on the marketplace, but all important is that you're trying to focus your efforts in one central repository. So it should be all stored and accessible in central repository. Otherwise, the enterprise is losing a lot of benefit of reporting on all these cross relationships. So now take a look to the process modeling. What is process modeling, or what is a process at all? So there are different definitions. One definition is listed here. It's a series of steps designed to produce a product or service. Most processes are cross-functional, and there are two types of processes. We define the primary processes that are actually these processes that result in a product or service that is received by an organizational external customer, or the other one are invisible to the external customer but essential to the effective management of a business. We call them then support processes. So at the end, it's a process. And how does a process flow looks like? Normally you have an event, a trigger. This trigger starts a process flow, an ongoing process flow with at least one result. Then, depending on your notation, you can add a swim lane to get an understanding who is responsible for which process, or at which location this process is performed. You can also add the data to know which data is used for which process, or which application is supporting which process. And last but not least, you can also add the technology, for example. And if you're still not satisfied, you can add any kind of your own user-defined object, like audit question, control, compliance requirement, risks, and so on. But at the end, it doesn't really matter which kind of object you add. This diagram looks like a mess. You cannot see anything. It's like a typical drawing tool. Too much information on one diagram. So that's the reason why you need again then the central repository where you can add, or where you can store all these objects, properties, association, the notation, the diagrams, and everything centrally accessible in the repository. It keeps you a clear diagram for everyone, easy to understand for the end user as well as for the professional. The next slide is about the POLDAT objects. There are processes, organization, location, data, application, technology. But it's also important to understand they have actually a relationship with each other. And this is this hexagon of change, has its origin from CSC Catalyst. And there are basic ideas. If you change one object out of this hexagon, it will have an impact on all the other objects, of course. So now if you add your own objects, they might be affected as well. And as already mentioned, your own objects could be anything that you can think of, like policy object, business goals, projects, risks for risk assessment, critical success factors, KPI, key performance indicators, and plenty more. All these relationships have also a name, so they are fulfilling a specific need. For example, the organization works at a location, or the organization performs a process. It's also important that you choose a notation that allows you to add multiple relationships. For example, the organization also manage a process, not only perform. So which notation is now the right one? Unfortunately, there is no right or wrong. If you ask 5 people, you get 6 answers back. So at the end, the notation, the framework you choose, needs to be aligned to your own objective and goals. You have to make sure that the notation and framework is easy to understand for the audience, like for the end user, the project members, IT and business people as well. Before you start your project, run a proof of concept to make sure your notation framework and also your modeling tool fulfill your needs. There are plenty of different notations on the marketplace, starting with dynamic flow, process flow, any kind of swim lane diagrams, UML diagrams, process hierarchies, organization chart, matrix diagrams. It all depends on what are your objectives for your process modeling exercise. Similar to the framework, there are different industry frameworks like the ETOM model for the telecom industry, like the ITIL model for the service management organization, and there are plenty others like Archimate, NAF, TOGAF, DODA framework. But again here, it's just up to your requirements, which kind of framework suits you best. Let's take a next look to the modeling tool. Which modeling tool fulfills your requirements? There are plenty of analysts outside like Forrester, Gardner, Aberdeen. They're all evaluating the major player in different areas in enterprise architecture, business process analysis, IT planning and so on. You can download all the reports from the different vendor sites. For my little example that you have seen in this PowerPoint, I've used case-wise products, which you can see on the top right quadrant in all the three Forrester waves. I hope you have enjoyed the presentation. It's now time for a break. Any feedback is more than welcome, and thanks very much for your attention.